And good morning. Welcome to the Pulse-WV Live, a network that beats to the heart of God. Good morning. It is Thursday, the 25th day of August. We are just almost done with August. It's amazing, Olivia, how fast time goes.
So true.
I know, isn't it? I mean, just like I remember my dad's 81, and I remember his 50th birthday party. I remember when
Wow.
he was 40. I remember all those. I mean, it's like I remember where I am now, where he was. It's just amazing how fast time goes, for sure. We were thinking last night just about as reminiscing over memories and just how fast the kids grew up and all that. So enjoy those times. Enjoy those times. Glad to have you all tuned in today. And like I told Olivia a few minutes ago, um, I I had a personal YouTube channel that I forgot that I had. So now we are broadcasting live again on YouTube, and we're broadcasting live on Facebook, Twitch, Instagram. No, not Instagram, but see Twitter, and also there's one more, LinkedIn. We're all live on those networks. So we encourage you to share the broadcast, let people know what's going on, and get the word out, and we would greatly appreciate that. Well, today's Olivia's Day, every other Thursday, and Olivia is the co-pastor to our Charleston campus that we are planning on launching in April of 2023 in Charleston, West Virginia. And so she's got something that's on her heart about from vision to clarity, and this is over in Mark chapter 8. And so where did this come from?
Well, um, I have been going through the Bible, kind of looking through the scriptures about vision. Of course, I go to Maranatha as well, so we have been studying vision there, and so I kind of branched off into my own study as well, and just began to look this up. And I'm looking at how Jesus dealt with people who needed vision. um, because we're learning all about vision and what it's like to have a vision and how to maintain a vision and all these things. So I was looking for the personal interactions of Jesus with vision, and I stumbled onto this in Mark 8, which is a common scripture. We all remember the blind man, but something I didn't think about. Here, I just now saw this as we were waiting on the podcast to come up. So I realized that Jesus was just with the disciples, and he had fed the 4,000, and he had leftover baskets full. And it goes right into them going into Bethsaida. And I thought, well, my goodness, he just did a miracle. And they were with Jesus and they got to experience it. And he's saying to them, do you not understand? Like, I will provide. And then they come here from a place of overflow already where he had done a miracle and begin to experience, to see him heal someone else. And this is the person that needed vision. So I was in Mark chapter 8 and verses 22 through 26. So I can start reading there real quick. Well, the first verse it says, and they came to Bethsaida, and they brought a blind man to Jesus and implored him to touch him. And I just stopped and I, like you and I do, Pastor John, we look up the meanings of things and we look up name meanings. And so I was looking up Bethsaida and I noticed that it meant mercy, but it also means a house of fish, a house of fruit. So it's like a plenteous, a plentiful place. And I noticed that they were just in a place where there wasn't anything and Jesus had to provide. And now they moved to a place that's more plentiful, in the meaning. And so, but here the need wasn't provision, it was sight. So Jesus is encountering this blind man. And so I look at this and I think, my goodness, he had to have some good friends around him because these friends led him all the way to Jesus. They knew that Jesus was coming. They were aware that Jesus was on the scene. So they had to be paying attention to their surroundings. And they were also, they took him and led him by the hand. So I noticed that these friends had to be directional. It's important who's around us and who we have linked up with us and who's beside of us. So they began to implore, it says implore that Jesus would heal him or touch him. And so if you look up implore, that means beg. It just means beg. So they are literally begging Jesus to heal their friend. And we need friends around us that, that want to see us walk out kingdom vision. We need people that are connected to the kingdom vision, and are able to, lift up our hands like Moses, when he got weak, so that these people began to take their friend to Jesus, and they said, please touch him. So it says that Jesus, taking the blind man by the hand, he brought him out of the village. And after spitting on his eyes and laying hands on him, he asked him, do you see anything? And I have to really break that down because there's so much in this. So I see that the blind man had to be led. Not only did he have to be led by his friends to Jesus because they knew where Jesus was, but he had to be led again by Jesus. So he's led from one group, he takes the hand of Jesus and is led again. So he has to be familiar with, when we're wanting vision, we have to know to be led. Because the kingdom vision that comes from the Lord is only coming from a leading. Because when we're taking the lead, we have our own vision and we have our own plans and our own agenda. But when we are being led, we can have kingdom, agendas and kingdom plans.
Well, let me know so how people can differentiate between a leading from God and something they desire. What's the how do you determine between the two?
Well, the voice of God always comes with peace, and then the vision of God is to, of course, to love Him. It's always going to bring you closer to loving Him and loving people. How can you bless Him? How can you bless people? And then if it's just us, it's going to edify ourselves. It's going to edify. It's kind of just going to be like, we can have good ideas to bless people, but usually those are rooted from the Lord. So it's more self-focused when it's from us. It's not as directional. When it comes from the Lord, we will notice that it's more directional. Just like we see, with his friends, they were going to Jesus, and as they were moving in close proximity to Jesus, they were directional about how to lead him there. So when we have kingdom vision for ourselves or for others, it doesn't matter. We are going to be directional, and we're going to be very focused, and we'll be focused on Jesus. So they were, they led him here, they led him to Jesus, and Jesus begins to take him by the hand. So I had to stop there and think, when we're thinking about the hand, I'm thinking that this man, he is blind, so he is without one of his senses, but he's using the sense that he does have to touch Jesus. He's using the hand, the touch. So we've got to be faithful with what we have, and honor God with it. And that's another answer, is really just, it will bring glory to God. When it's a kingdom vision, it will bring God glory, because it'll ultimately lead back to him. So he is using what he has, and beginning to touch the Lord, and he had to let the Lord touch him. Not only is he reaching for the Lord's hand, the Lord's reaching for his hand. So we see that this is like a love encounter, and that's everything that the Bible is about. It's about Jesus wanting to have a love encounter with us so much that he dies on the cross and rises again. But we see here that, if we think about touch, it's, a representation of intimacy, because intimacy is that closeness. It's touching the Lord. It's being with the Lord. It's hearing the Lord's voice. So he is, clearly there's a conversation here. So he uses his hearing as well to listen to what the Lord's saying, because he's, Jesus is asking them a question. But we see that touch is a form of intimacy. And it also says that Jesus brought him out of the village. And that is a place of comfort. The village is a place of community. It's where everyone is. Or it could be a place of comfort because he's always been around the village. So Jesus takes him to a new place in order to heal him. And what I think the most about this is he's taken him away from the crowd. Because you remember, when Jesus went to heal Lazarus and he sent all the mourners out of the room, he's creating an atmosphere. He's cultivating an atmosphere of faith. And in this village, Jesus does not decide to heal him in this village. So I'm thinking that the faith may have not been in the village. So Jesus is taking him to a new place. And sometimes we have to take, a walk with Jesus and go to a new place to hear what he's saying, because the noise may be too loud in the village. We may not have that, quietness where we can really hear Jesus's voice. So that's why it's so important. I can't emphasize enough how important the secret place is for your Christian walk, is to get alone with Jesus, to get in the quiet, to hear his voice, and silence every distraction, to quiet our minds, to quiet all the noise and all the chaos of the day, and get alone with Jesus in the secret place. And that is where, he has conversation with Jesus. That is where his breakthrough occurs. I know for me personally, through the years, I've had so many layers of fear, and all the weight of the world and all the junk begins to fall off of me when I'm in the secret place with Jesus. It's, sometimes we can have a breakthrough in a church service, and, that's all well and good. But I found that the biggest breakthroughs I've ever had have been alone with Jesus. And because we have those moments, and we can bring that back to church and encourage other people with what he did with us, in the private, in the secret place. So Jesus takes him here, away from the comfort, away from the noise, away from the people. But I'm also, just thinking about this. I'm picturing this, that Jesus is taking him by the hand and he's leading him to the place. And I think about, I have small children. So, when I'm leading them, I'm taking their hand, I'm keeping them away. I'll say, oh, this way, here's mud. Oh, come this way. There's, a hole in the ground or something. You're keeping them on level ground. You're keeping them away from harm, away from danger, because you have them by the hand. And so Jesus is ultimately navigating for him a safe place for him to go, and not be hurt, not be endangered. But so many times we like to pick the hard way, like we will just go by ourselves, and we're facing the obstacles that we didn't have to face. But Jesus here is leading him to safety, and he's leading him to a place of breakthrough. But then let me break apart what he does, because we see here that he does two things. Number one, it says he spits on his eyes, which would really freak some of us out, especially with COVID.
Oh
Can you
yeah.
imagine Jesus, in this era here? So it says he spits, and you know what hit me? Like, this just blew my mind, because it's what came from the very mouth of God touched his eyes. And I'm thinking, wow, like, what I'm thinking about the spoken word of the Lord and the written word of the Lord, and how we can stand on that. When that touches us, we can stand on that against, he's not seeing physical healing yet, but he can stand on what was just touching his eyes. He had a touch, so we can stand on the word. We can stand on the fact that I don't care what it looks like, I am healed, I am set free, because I have encountered Jesus, and I know his character, I know his nature. But he spits on his eyes, and this is what blew my mind. If you look at Isaiah 30:27, it says that his tongue is an all-consuming fire. Think about that. He spit on this man's eyes from a tongue that is all consuming fire.
Wow.
So his eyes were touched with fire. His vision was touched with a fire. And that's another way we will know that the vision is from the Lord, because it will carry a distinct fire, a distinct passion for God, a fire for God. It will not be lukewarm. It will not be complacent. We will have fire for God. And so the fire of God is touching this man's eyes, because he wanted his vision to burn for Jesus. His vision would be burning for Jesus. So first he spits. Second, it says that he lays hands on him, and laying hands on him, he asked him, "Do you see anything?" So the hand of God. There's all these scriptures in the Bible about the hand of God. We see that represents blessing. We see that represents strength. We see that it represents power. And we see that in many verses. You can look it up, in Psalms, in different places. It says that the hand of God upholds. So not only is Jesus, allowing the all consuming fire to touch this man's eyes, he is physically touching his eyes. And his hand, is blessing his vision, because his hand represents blessing. His hand is strengthening his vision, because his hand represents strength in the Bible. His hand also represents power, so he is empowering his vision. But then it also says uphold. So Jesus is upholding the vision that he is giving him. That is so powerful in itself, because when we have kingdom vision, the Lord himself will uphold us. He will fight for us. The word says that he is for us. He is not against us. He is for us. So he wants to uphold the vision that he put inside of you today. He wants to uphold it. He wants to carry it out full term and not let the enemy come in and do anything with it. So I also reminded of one other thing that the hand does in the Bible, and this isn't necessarily the hand of God, but the hand of man, because he's fully God and he's fully man here. But we see in these are, I think I used these last week in, or I mean 2 weeks ago when we did a podcast, but in First Timothy chapter 4 and verse 4, it says, "Do not neglect the spiritual gift that was bestowed upon you." And well, there's also a verse in let me see, it's also in Second Timothy 1:6. But both of these are verses that says this. It goes on to say the prophetic utterance with the laying on of hands that was bestowed upon you. And then the other verse says to kindle afresh the gift of God which is in you through the laying on of hands. So not only was Jesus empowering and strengthening and upholding and empowering this man's vision, but he was imparting something. Because the hand, when you lay on the hand, it imparts something. So the very vision of Jesus was imparted into this man with no sight. And that is just,
that's so good.
That's just so powerful. Because
so
Jesus
good.
was trying to impart kingdom vision inside of him and not just physical vision. Do you have anything you want to add there before I go into the
Let me ask you a question, because I was reading over in John chapter 9. And in John chapter 9, there's a situation where there's another blind man. Okay, and this other blind man, he had spit clay he had put clay on his eyes, and then he did not lead him out of the town. He told him to go into the pool of Siloam and wash.
Yeah.
And so it's like I see a different situation. It's like, okay, the guy was healed, but he was like sent away. And I think that is what do you think about that? What do you think God was or Jesus was doing there? I just think it was kind of neat.
I think there were different things. Yeah, I think there are different things, because we got to ultimately think about blind Bartimaeus as well and the different people that Jesus encountered. But I feel that different people have different assignments. This person was more focused on the very vision of Jesus, because we see that he's imparting and he's saying to withhold this, you have to be on the narrow road away from the people. So his assignment was a little bit different, because he may have known that people were a distraction for this person. But with the other person, just to backtrack for a second, the fact that in that scripture, Jesus begins to spit. So, we see again the all consuming fire. We see that his mouth, is touching the man's eyes. But we also see that he mixed that with the dirt from the ground. And what immediately to make clay, it says he mixed the spit with the dirt from the ground to make clay. And I thought that, this is what I've always gotten from that scripture, was that the highest point of heaven, which is the very breath of God, touched the lowest point of the earth, which was the dirt.
Wow.
And it mixed together and became a clay. So Jesus went from the highest point and touched the very lowest point to heal this man. He will come to the depths to heal you. And that's what he did with the man. And I believe it was John 9, you said. And so this man has a different assignment because he had gone to the lowest depth to touch this man. This man needed to go to the lowest parts and touch these people as well in a place of overflow. But this man's assignment in Mark chapter 8 was different, because he had kingdom vision that he needed to stay on the narrow path to unfold. So the difference is the assignment for these people. Wow. The healing is the same, but the difference is the assignment. And it just blows my mind. There's so much in these scriptures that we have read our whole lives, and it's still coming alive to us. So I'm just like in awe of the Lord. But it's all about assignment. Certain people, we see that he says, go back You think about the man possessed with a legion in Mark chapter 5.
Right.
You know, he's completely healed, and he wants to go follow Jesus. And he's completely healed. And I feel that the Lord showed me that a lot of our sin and a lot of our situations and our bondage is a result of fear, because that's one of the ways that the enemy comes in and takes power. So I feel that this man was so bound in fear.
Yes.
And when Jesus showed up with, the demoniac in Mark 5, he heals this man. He's completely in his right mind. And what is addressed? What immediately rises up in the crowd? Fear. So he says, I want to follow you, Jesus. Jesus says, no, there's fear right here. You've just been set free. Go set these people free. Because what you overcome, you have authority over, and you can pray over in other people's lives.
Yes.
So, for this man in Mark 8, his assignment wasn't to go pray vision over people. It was just to uphold the vision that God gave him. But for the man in John 9, his assignment was to help people in the lowest point see the vision. So it's different assignments.
And one thing that I thought also was different from Mark 8 and from John 9 is in Mark 8, he tells him in verse 26, and he sent him away to his house, saying, neither go into the town, nor tell it to anyone in the town. It's like he took him out of the town, and then he said not to say anything to the people in the town. And then you look over in John chapter 9, and this guy is going through the neighborhood, and people are seeing him that was blind. And it's like Jesus didn't tell him to keep it a secret.
Right.
But isn't it amazing how in both situations they're different? Because one, Jesus led him to there and then told him not to say anything. And in John chapter 9, he leads him away without telling him, without leading, by the hand. But then he doesn't tell him not to say anything. And then it's just kind of neat. I love the parallels.
Yeah.
I just think that's really cool.
Yeah. It makes me think of different types, like different, how we have different love languages with the Lord. You were talking about the last time we did the podcast, how some people just sit at the feet of Jesus, like Mary. But with you're having like a more busy day. So you hear his whispers all through the day, and you're talking to him all through the day differently. Your intimacy with the Lord looks different than someone else's. And ultimately, I feel like that's kind of a byproduct of what's going on here. The guy in Mark 8, needed to have that solidarity. He needed to sit at the feet of Jesus. He needed to do that to stay focused. Mm-hmm. Had he been busy, had he been around the crowd, that things might not have worked out, because Jesus here took him away from the crowd to get his breakthrough, because clearly the crowd would have been a distraction to him. So it's like, the way we encounter Jesus and the way that we use our love language to him, it may be different to uphold the vision that he put inside of us.
That's just really cool. I just love the parallels on that. We always get into trouble somewhere, don't we, here with these scriptures? No doubt. That's really good stuff. So what's part 2 of this when you deal with vision and clarity?
Well, this is the beautiful part. So at this moment, Jesus starts asking him, what do you see? And so we see that he doesn't have clarity at first, right? He says that I see, he said, he looked up and said, I see men, for I see them like trees walking around. So he sees men as trees.
Right.
So I see here that he's not fully healed. We can all assume he's not fully healed, because it took people with sight to know that he's not fully healed. But we see that he is thankful, and he is descriptive of what he does see. And, I'm taken back to the parable of the talents, that when you're faithful with what you have, the Lord will give you more. Notice the Lord, asked him what he saw, but he didn't stop here, because he was describing what he could see. He didn't get into this thing where he says, I don't see everything. It's blurry. He literally just said, this is what I see. And that's exactly what the Lord needed to be able to give him more. So he's on the journey to clarity, because he's faithful with what he has. And he's seeking the Lord and in conversation with the Lord. But I want to just interject here. On the flip side, we should never be content with blurred vision, kingdom vision. But I'm going to go back to the other flip side in a minute. But this is just a side note, because I wanted to add this, because with me personally, I have vision trouble. I have blurred vision, double vision, fatigue that's behind my eyes. Like I feel tired all day long. So when I close my eyes, I feel normal. So I'm used to the blur, I'm used to the doubles. And I noticed that sometimes when I'm so focused on seeing something, it's a distraction. Because if I take my day and I say, I'm not seeing great today, I just want to sit and I just want to rest, I've allowed that to distract me from purpose. Or I'll say, I'm really tired today. If I don't press past that flesh, then I will neglect important things and get discouraged. So it's so important to not focus on what we don't see, but focus on what we do see. I do want to add that in there. But notice what this man did see. Oh, let me actually backtrack. You notice, like, when you go to the eye doctor and they're examining your eyes, and you're getting drops in to get dilated. With me, that doesn't make much of a difference because it's already not clear. So when you get damage in your eye, because that's something that's typically going to blur, and you don't see it, you can't tell that there's more damage being done, that's a sign that there's a lack of vision. And so
Wow.
that's how complacency is in the Bible, and lukewarmness, and it says that if you're not hot or cold, it's a dangerous place to be in. So there's complacency when you can't see the damage of the enemy. So we have to be aware of the tactics of the enemy. So I just had to interject that as well. But so complacency is dangerous because if I'm not seeing clearly, I can't tell when the drops come in if it's more blurry or not, and that's sad because damage is being done and I don't see it. So we have to be on guard. But here we see that the blind man, going back to the blind man, he saw his surroundings, he saw environment. He said there's trees, he's seeing people. He is looking at the environment and the atmosphere. And those are great things to do, but Jesus ultimately wanted him to look at him. And this may be why he didn't send the man out to the people, because he needed to get the focus on Jesus first and not the surroundings.
Right.
And so he's seeing the surroundings, he's seeing what's happening. And this can be so dangerous because we can see the movement and miss Jesus. We can see a hyped up church service and miss Jesus in the still small voice. We can, I know people that literally go from conference to conference, from, when healing ministers come in, they'll go to those, they'll go and they'll seek healing from certain people when it's right in front of them at their church. God is the same and he can do the same thing wherever. But it's like people will go where the movement is because they are so,
It's almost like a
focused on
thrill
the,
seeker.
yeah. So it's like, when we start to get that focus on the surroundings, like this, like he just said, I see people. He's looking around and he's seeing people. So he is not in clarity yet. And so Jesus again in verse 25 begins to it says, then again he laid his hands on his eyes, and he looked intently and was restored and began to see everything clearly. So Jesus touches him again. And if we think about that, the number two, because that's twice now that Jesus has laid his hands on him, what's different this time? Two is the number of covenant.
Wow.
2 is the number of promise. So Jesus is promising him a healing. He is making a covenant with him that we are in relationship. And I will touch you until you have sight. I will touch you until you are filled with kingdom vision. I am making my covenant with you. I am longing to be intimate with you and talk to you and allow you to see with my eyes. And that is what Jesus is wanting to do. He wants us to be in covenant. He wants us to have that promise with him. I'm reminded of Abraham. When we think about covenant or promise, I'm reminded of Abraham because, the Lord told him to go, to leave all he had. I believe it was chapter 12. And he says in Genesis, he says to go. And so Abraham just leaves all the comfort, leaves everything, and he follows the Lord. And it's when he leaves that the Lord begins to speak promise over him. When he steps out, the Lord says, I'll make you a father of many nations, even when he didn't know where he was going. And so this blind man is being led by the Lord. He doesn't necessarily know where he's going, but the Lord begins to touch him so that they can go into covenant as well, just like Abraham. So I thought, wow, that's vision. and so it's an encounter with the Lord. You're getting touched again from the Lord. It's symbolic for an encounter and promise. But also notice that it says he looked intently, and that's with intention. With intention. So when we look intently into the eyes of Jesus, that means we have a fixed gaze. Our eyes are set on Jesus.
Yes.
Our hearts are set on Jesus. We are intentional about what we're looking at. So no longer is he looking at, just looking around. He's looking intently. He's not just saying, "Hey, what's around me?" He is focused. He's laser focused on Jesus. And so when that happens, he got the clarity that he needed. This is the part two. It's when he began to focus that he really began to see Jesus. And that's when we begin to look into Jesus's eyes. It says, "Taste and see that the Lord is good." Every time we go and we're with him and we're intimate with him, we want more.
Yeah.
We cannot compare anything to his presence in that moment, in his presence, and how beautiful he is. Once you've tasted,
Right.
once you've seen, you're going to go back and you're going to want more. And that's how we see that he got clarity. Clarity is knowing how much that you need Jesus. Clarity is, a fixed gaze. Clarity is directional as well. So I can prove that with a verse here. Let me pull up this verse. Psalm 32 and verse 8. It says, "I will instruct you and teach you in the way that you should go. I will counsel you with my loving eye on you." So I love that verse because it talks about vision, his vision for us, and how it comes with direction.
Wow.
His clear vision, it says his eye is on us. He's clearly focused on us because we need to focus on him, but when he is clearly focused on us, it comes with instruction. So that's how I know that clarity is directional and instructional.
What's so neat about this story
Mm-hmm.
is I seem to think, and let me tell you why. Is in Mark chapter 8 with the blind man, and he said this. He said that as he looked up, and he said, "I see men as trees walking,"
Mm-hmm.
which tells me that this man at one point had his sight.
Yeah. Yeah.
But,
Look at
okay,
the verse in verse 25. It used the word restored.
yes.
So
So
that's like, your sight's once there and then you lose it.
because he knew what men looked
Yeah.
like and he knew what walking
Yeah.
looked like. But then if you go into
Yeah.
John 9, the man was born blind.
Yeah. Yeah.
And here's what's so crazy. I go back to this, and I'm going to have to dig into this or think about it. Okay, Jesus led the man who once could see,
Mm-hmm.
but the man who never saw, he did not lead him. He told him to
Wow.
go.
Wow.
I don't know what the parallel is to that, but I just think
Yeah.
that I don't know, maybe it's a faith thing. Well, okay,
Yeah.
let's go back to that. Okay, because maybe in Mark chapter 8, and I'm just talking here, okay, so it was restored and he knew what
Yeah.
the men look like and walking look like. Okay, but Jesus led him. Okay.
Yeah.
So maybe the fella in that was born blind didn't
Mm-hmm.
have a faith problem.
Yeah.
Maybe he didn't have a faith problem. Maybe he just said, "Okay, well, this is what Jesus said to do, so I'm going to find my way."
Yes.
He had to find his way. It doesn't say, Olivia, that anybody led
Yeah.
him.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
that he literally had to go and wash in the pool of Siloam.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how far away he was. I
Yeah.
don't know where he was, but he had never seen before. And
Yeah.
then he was totally restored. I just think that's really cool.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like, so he's used to being not led
Right.
because he's been blind. You remember you were just talking a few weeks ago about Saul on his
Yeah.
journey to Paul. And
Yeah.
remember when he was struck blind, he had to be led?
Yes.
He had once had vision and then had to be led.
Yes.
So I feel that, when we don't have vision, we don't, it's like maybe you don't even have a desire to be led because you don't have vision. Or you're used to knowing how to navigate without help. You're used to, with me, like I was called, I will say called, I'm not claiming it, legally blind.
Right.
And, it's like I had more sight as a kid, maybe around like fifth grade, it got worse and, progressed. But yeah, I noticed that sometimes, like, I don't necessarily have to be led because I've learned to use my feeling. I've learned to use other things, other senses to get me where I need to be. And people at church will be like, "Oh, do you need help up the stairs?" I'm like, "No, I'm good, thank you." I'm used to it. I've learned, without depth perception and without these things, I've learned how to use the other senses. But I feel that here, the people that need to be restored, that were once with vision, I feel that maybe they need to be led because they had vision and didn't use it. So this time they have to be led to be, to use it correctly.
Right.
It's like the Lord has to step in and say, you need help with it.
Yeah.
So maybe this is why, this man is directed to go back home and learn how to use his vision, where the other man who was blind from birth didn't need help to go,
Yeah.
to narrow it in.
It's like
So he's,
he
yeah,
didn't need faith. I mean, it's like
yeah,
he didn't need the extra little boost
yeah,
of the hand of Jesus to get there. I think that is
yeah,
really really
yeah.
cool, and that's a little bit of revelation that could be
It
preached.
is.
I
You
looked
can
up.
do that.
Yeah, I looked up the word legally blind here. Listen to this.
Mhm.
It's visual accuracy less than 20/200 is considered legally
Yeah.
blind. Why do they call it legally blind? I mean, it's
I don't know.
so it's like what's the opposite of legally of legal illegal. So what's illegal blind? If it's legal for you to be blind, then what's illegal blind? It's like
I don't
it
know.
doesn't
I
even
don't.
make sense. It
I've
doesn't.
never understood that. I think it's more of a technical term because we're not allowed to drive or
Right.
do
Well,
certain things that are
as
along the law. I don't
as my
know.
daughter would say, that's stupid.
Right. I get
Yeah,
it. I
that's just
get it.
it just is. It really is. Well, I'm telling you,
Yeah.
I don't stand off of your healing. I don't stand off of John Sandy's healing.
Yeah. Thank
I
you.
don't take it lightly because let me tell you something. God's faithful. God
Yeah.
is faithful, and I'm just trusting for both of you. To be totally restored. I mean,
Thank
if he
you.
did it in Mark 8 and John 9, he's the same.
Yeah.
He's the same Jesus then.
I
And,
know.
and then
I know.
you got one dude here that has no hardly any faith about it.
Yeah.
Maybe his faith was robbed. Because of circumstances,
Yeah.
which happens.
Yeah, that I've seen that happen. I started thinking because, faith is the opposite of sight in all
Yeah,
reality, and those of us that don't have sight have to live by faith.
yeah,
We're in faith that where we step's going to be okay.
yeah,
So maybe that's why he didn't have the faith problem. It
yeah.
could be that. This
That's
makes me
definitely
want to look at blind Bartimaeus. I think it's in Mark chapter 10. I want to see how Jesus directed him, to go after. I know that blind Bartimaeus was on the side of the road, and that always stood out to me that he was on the side of the road and not even in the path. And Jesus was getting ready to leave. So he's getting ready to leave the town, and he still, encounters him. Blind Bartimaeus starts crying out. He uses what he does have. He doesn't have the sight sense, but he's using. It's let's see, Mark 10:46. It says that they came to Jericho, and as he was leaving Jericho, um, and I think Jericho, I don't know, I think that might mean peace or praise or something. There's some sort of meaning to that. But anyway, he had his disciples in a large crowd. We see a crowd here. So, in Mark 8, this man doesn't get healed in the crowd. He's pulled away from the crowd. But blind Bartimaeus gets healed in the crowd. And so he's sitting on the side of the road. When he heard that Jesus of Nazarene was there, he began to cry out and say, "Jesus, son of David, have mercy on me." See, it's like he knows part of the identity of Jesus because he calls him by name, but he also says son of David. So he knows that he is the Son of God. Like, he knows that he is Son of Man. He knows that he is Jesus. He didn't just say teacher like the Pharisees or Sadducees. He gives him a full name. So he has an understanding of the identity of Jesus. And so they were telling him to be quiet, but he kept crying out, Son of Man, or Son of David, have mercy on me. So it's like the crowd here, he's not going to let the crowd silence him. Maybe the guy in Mark 8 would have let the crowd silence him. But blind Bartimaeus did not let that be an obstacle. He cries out again, Son of David, have mercy on me. And Jesus stopped and said, call him here. So they called to him. It doesn't say that they led him. They called to him and said, go closer in the proximity of Jesus. So he knew how to follow a voice, because apparently he had been blind for a long time. He knew how to follow the voice. So when they said to him, take courage, stand up, he's calling for you. The same people that said shut up are basically now saying, be strong, he's calling for you. Because when Jesus got closer, their voice and their attitude began to change. So blind Bartimaeus throwing off his cloak, because that was a cloak of a beggar, that was the identity of a beggar. So he's taking off his formerly known identity, and it says he jumped up and came to Jesus. There was an excitement in his step when Jesus entered the scene. So he apparently knew a little bit about Jesus to have that sort of excitement being in his presence. Because some people, the Pharisees and Sadducees are an example, they weren't excited when they were around Jesus. So, this is clearly he has seen that Jesus has done something, or heard that Jesus has done miracles, or knew him in some capacity. And how we know him, depends on how we respond to him. So Jesus asked him, what do you want me to do for you? Which is a question of motivation. It's a question of the motive of your heart. What do you want? What do you want? So Jesus asked a question of motive. And then the blind man said to him, Rabboni, I want to regain my sight. So he said, give me vision. If he would have he could have asked for anything, because Jesus said, what do you want? In that moment, how many of us would have forsaken our need for vision and said, ooh, give me money, or, give me something else? But he says, I want sight. And because he asked for something that would help him navigate life a little more clearly and help him understand Jesus and his healing, Jesus grants the request, and he says, go, your faith has made you well. It doesn't say that he touched him. He followed directions, because we see that he was trustworthy in the beginning to follow directions, because Jesus said, tell him to come here. So all he did was go. He wasn't led. He wasn't helped. He went.
Right.
He was one of those people that followed directions. So he says, go, your faith has made you well. So clearly he had faith. It says immediately he regained his sight. So that again kind of says that maybe he had it before, because he regained his sight. Instead of, I never noticed that before. But he began following Jesus on the road. So all three of these men went a different path. So blind Bartimaeus regained. He didn't have to have help. He called Jesus by name and identity. He took directions. Didn't have to have help. Regained his sight. Yeah.
And he had faith.
Yes. Yes.
Because in verse 52 he says he has faith. But here's two things. Actually three things. Did I interrupt you? Sometimes there's a delay.
I was done.
Oh, okay. Sometimes there's a delay with this, and I don't mean to interrupt you. Okay, so a couple things here that I think are interesting. All right. The man at the blind Bartimaeus, and then the man who had to go wash into the pool of Siloam were beggars. Both of them were beggars.
Yeah.
The first guy, it doesn't say anything about him being a beggar. Okay.
Wow. Yeah.
But he was the one with a lack of faith, if we could really say it that way.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
Now here's the other thing. Here's the other thing that I think is neat on why, and I don't know why they put it in here, but there's a reason. Look at verse 50 of Mark chapter 10.
Mm-hmm.
It says, and he, casting away his garments, arose and came to Jesus. Okay, so here's my question. All right, so what defines us in our life? Okay, The lady with the issue of blood, we don't know her name.
Mm-hmm.
Okay,
Mm-hmm.
what defined her was her title.
Yeah.
Okay, blind Bartimaeus. If you notice, his name was not Bartimaeus. They had it as blind Bartimaeus. His affliction defined him.
Yeah.
Okay, so
mm-hmm.
what was the garment that he cast away?
Yeah.
Why did he cast that away? And so that would be my question in this is, okay, but it doesn't say anything about a garment on the man with the pool at Shalom or the guy with the trees. But with this one, he cast his garments away.
Yeah.
So you've got two guys that had faith, one guy who didn't have faith. The guy who didn't have faith was not a beggar. The other two were. And then you look at blind Bartimaeus had garments that he cast away.
Yeah.
And he was the only one. Mm-hmm. He was the only one where it was talked about that he followed Jesus. The other two doesn't say anything about them following Jesus, but blind Bartimaeus did in verse 52. He says, "Your faith has made you whole," and immediately he received his sight. Okay, something else here. The other two guys didn't immediately get their sight.
Yeah. Yeah.
This dude did, because he had faith. Wow.
Yeah. 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 He took a command.
Huh?
You know, do you remember when Jesus, when the guy came up to Jesus and he's saying, you know, was it his son that was at home or something like that, and he was, or a servant or something along those lines, and he said, just say the word, you know, I know you can heal.
Right.
And Jesus said, I haven't found so great faith in all the land. So, you know, blind Bartimaeus, Jesus just said the word and he listened to Jesus.
Yeah,
so it's like boom.
And the other two dudes, there was nothing about faith mentioned.
No.
He didn't tell them their faith made them whole, but he said that immediately this blind Bartimaeus got his sight. The other two guys had to do something.
Yes.
There was a command with those two things.
Yeah.
And so,
you know, I think it's interesting, like with going back to the cloak, he's taking layers off.
Yeah.
And he is trading, because he's known as blind Bartimaeus, and cloak represents identity. So he's taking off the blind identity that where he has to sit and beg. And Jesus touches him. Jesus doesn't even touch him. Jesus just says, "You're whole. You're made whole." So Jesus is declaring his healing with his words. But this is what I find ironic. The name Bartimaeus, it means son of Timaeus.
Oh, wow.
Where bar is, it means son. It means son of. So when we strip off blind, you're just left with son. So you're trading the cloak and the identity of who you've been because of your circumstances, and you're trading it for sonship.
Wow.
That's
which is you're entering into a covenant.
Yeah.
That's so good.
Just like Jesus touched the guy in Mark 8 twice, that's covenant, you know.
Yeah, he touched the other two guys, but he didn't touch blind Bartimaeus.
I know. See, they're all
like
different.
He was the faith guy. He was the faith guy. You know.
Yeah.
That's really good.
They all went a different way too. You know, it's like one is led back home.
Yeah.
One is led to the people around them, and one is led to follow Jesus.
Yeah.
Wherever he goes.
Big sermon there.
Yeah. Yeah.
Let's
do it.
Absolutely. Well, I'll tell you, God's so faithful. And what do you say to those people that are watching today, Olivia, that need to step up their relationship? Maybe they're blind spiritually, and they need to receive their sight. What do you say to them?
Yeah, I would say taste and see. It's so beautiful that it says taste and see. You know, it's saying use your senses, use your sensory perception to understand Jesus. Use what you have to understand Jesus. He will meet you where you are with what you have, because these guys didn't all have everything they needed. You know, the first man in Mark 8 had his hand and his touch. He was able to be led by Jesus. You know, the guy in John 9, he had a totally different communication with Jesus. And the blind Bartimaeus, you know, he was just using words. So they were all directed, they were all led one way or another. So every person got direction from the Lord. And my advice to those that aren't seeing is to get your direction from the Lord. We can taste and try and see all these other things that they will not fulfill, they will not satisfy. And you can only have clear vision in Jesus. All these other things are meant to blur the obstacles of your vision. The enemy wants to kill, to steal, and destroy, and he will use distractions. He will use everything he can to blur you. It says that that the non-believers, it says that their minds have been blinded. Their minds have been blinded. They have been darkened. Their understanding has been darkened because the enemy wants to keep you from seeing your breakthrough, from seeing the greatest relationship you could ever experience in your life, the only one that fulfills, the only one that sustains, the only one that satisfies. Amen. And so my advice to you is to reach out with what you do have and ask the Lord to touch you. Ask him to reveal himself to you. Even if you don't believe, ask him to show you. I've heard stories of people saying, God, if you're real, show me this, and he will meet you. If you want to see him, he will meet you. He says, draw unto me, and I will come near to you. He wants to meet you. He wants to be with you. And he wants to give you clear vision so you can navigate through life with his help and not alone, not with the circumstances, not with the weights of the world, but he wants to give you vision for your hope, for your expected end, for your future, for your destiny. He speaks life over you. He is for you, and he wants you. It's so simple, just ABC, just acknowledge, believe, and confess that Jesus died and rose again for you, and you can experience him today. He can come into your heart and live, and he will give you the clear vision you need for life.
Amen. Hallelujah. And if you're that person that needs that, all you have to do is just ask him to forgive you of your sins. Just say, Father, I am so sorry for the things that I've done. Come into my life and live. And it's that simple. And it's immediately that God forgets your past. God forgets your past. And the key to it is something, I don't know if you heard that revelation the other day on the sermon that I preached on Sunday, but it was just amazing that people need to stop living in their history.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, the Lord gave me that, and it wasn't even in the notes and everything. I had to write it down because I would forget it. So do not live in your history. If God is forgiving your history, the only person that knows your history are you and the devil. God forgets it. God gets amnesia on your history. He doesn't ever bring it back up to you. God is concerned with your future and your now. Because that's where you met him, is your now. And so that's what you need to work on. And so he loves you. He cares about you. Olivia, great job. Anxious to hear you speak on Sunday morning. We have Rob and Jen Neal and their praise team coming to the Pulse Church in Gassaway on Sunday morning. Olivia will be speaking, so we encourage you to be a part of that with us if you want to come to us. And you're on the East Coast, it's worth the drive. And if not, you can catch us on Facebook, YouTube, all the networks that we have, Twitter Live, as well as Twitch, and we're on LinkedIn as also. And then we'll upload this to Spotify, Google Play, Apple Podcasts. So please do me a favor and share the broadcast, let people know, and share it to your friends. That's your evangelism for the day. That's a pretty good deal, isn't it, Olivia?
Yeah.
No doubt. Well, thank you so much for being a part of the podcast. If you're interested in sowing a seed into this ministry, we encourage you to do that. You can do that by texting the word PULSE to 1-304-244-3187. It's on the screen. Or you can go to thepulsechurch.com and give through PayPal. Or you can mail your love gift to P.O. Box 141, Gassaway, West Virginia, 26624. Have a great day. Pastor Jay Mace will be with us live tomorrow morning, which will be Friday, for the next edition of the Pulse WV Live, a network that beats to the heart of God. Have a great day, everybody.